Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. We're come rain, shine, or anything in between. We're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Balthazar.
And apparently, even the universe wants this episode to be even more miserable than it was already going to be, because this is attempt number 3 at recording this episode for numerous technical difficulties. But I think that just sort of fits for this game. Houston ends up beating K-State 24-19, and people have been saying that this is probably the worst loss of the Kleiman era. And while I would nominate Arkansas State in 2020 to take that crown, for a normal non-COVID, non-Mickey Mouse season, yes, this probably is the worst loss of the Kleiman era, because at least BYU had the raucous environment and a bunch of fluky, sort of turnover, like a bunch of 1 in a million things that will never happen again. No, Houston just straight up wanted this game more than us. And we mentioned it on the preview. This is not a Houston team that you can afford to overlook, because they're going to punish you if you did. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. Is Willie Fritz is a necromancer, and Houston wanted the game more than us, and it's really disappointing to have done that. And Connor, I bet that this is the one time that you were indeed happy that you had to go to a wedding and therefore did not have to witness the horrors of this game.
Yeah. At first I was a little frustrated I wasn't going to be able to watch anything, because I was originally going to be able to watch at least like 30 minutes, but then the delay happened, and by the time the game was getting going again, had to get on the road because we had to drive a bit. But now I got Y Vision for a quarter, and after that I was just checking the score, and it was pretty embarrassing. I mean, I know I was the only person there that was checking it, but I was like, I'm embarrassed to be wearing K-State socks right now. So I was like, I need to make sure that my pant legs are all the way down every time I stand up. I can have nobody witness this right now.
Yeah, and I think the worst part about this game is we're not going to do traditional game day grades. I'm just going to sort of flash the grades and then ask Connor a question before I reveal my trap card. Quarterbacks was an F. We'll talk about it. Running backs was a C-. Wide receivers B+. Tight ends, fullbacks C. O-line C-. Defensive line and linebackers both got an A. Defensive backs got a D-. Riley got a D-, and Kleinerman got a B. So, Connor, just looking at sort of the stats page, is that what you would have expected in terms of grading?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. Defensive backs, I suppose, I've just kind of gotten used to them being bad at this point, which is a far cry from where we were to begin the season. But quarterback, wildly disappointing. And the stat line already wasn't great. But it's the sort of thing where if you just look at the raw stats, it's like 2 picks. Was it 2 interceptions directly to the defense, or was it 2 where like our receiver catches the ball and then inexplicably throws it directly up in the air and runs in the opposite direction, allowing for an interception? So it's like there's very different types of interceptions, but based off of what I've been able to glean, what you've told me is that these were definitely Avery's fault. So,
yeah, because the question that you first asked me after the game was,
were the picks Avery's fault?
Yes,
they
were, and they were pretty bad picks. And I'll wait to reveal the trap card until you sort of say everything else about the grades.
Yeah, and the big thing I think that really caught me about Avery was his running stats, where he was not sacked, but still only had 8 carries for 18 yards, which is just bad, particularly for a quarterback who's as gifted a runner as Avery is. which I think maybe speaks to the overall quality of the running game these last few weeks anyways, which once is an anomaly, twice is bad luck, 3 times is a problem. And we officially have a running game problem, which is something really shocking because we have DJ Giddens and Dylan Edwards in the backfield with Avery Johnson, and we cannot run the ball.
Yeah. And the run game coordinator from last year who had one of the better running games in the country.
Yeah.
So if you would have told me at the beginning of the year that the passing game would have been the more innovative and overall better part of the offense, I would have seen a world where it would have happened, but I wouldn't have really believed you about that world, honestly. But yeah, so that's the quarterbacks. But are there any other of those grades that you're like, huh, that's interesting? How did that get there?
The A's for the defensive line and linebackers is maybe the most interesting thing to draw from this, given that not only the offense was unable to score to close out the game, they went completely dormant there in the fourth quarter. But Houston scores 14 in the fourth quarter to come back and win this one. So it's interesting that the defensive line and linebackers both get A grades.
Yeah, and the reason why they scored those 14 points were both of them were extremely short fields for Houston. Well, okay, one wasn't extremely short. It was just, cross the 50. One, they picked off the ball and returned it to like the 4. So, yeah, the defensive line and the linebackers, they had an amazing performance. I mean, Austin Romaine was performing at a genuine All-American level. Austin Moore had a really good game. Brendan Mott had a really good game. Toby Osunsami forced a fumble. Des Purnell picked it up. So a lot of the people in the linebacking room and the defensive line room both contributed. I mean, there were 4 sacks, and granted, one of those is credited to a defensive back. But in my mind, here's the trap card. This game falls down to 4 people and 4 people only. If these people either did not exist or had an average game for them, -1, I'm not going to say which one, but Connor, you know exactly which one. The K-State probably wins this game. The one that I think is the most arguable is Mason Olguin, the long snapper, because there were 2 bad snaps that ended up costing K-State a total of 4 points, which, the difference is 5.
So is that why that extra point got blocked?
Yep.
I was meaning to ask about that, but I was caught up in everything else sucking, and I kind of forgot about that extra detail. So, and is that also why we had a Simon McClannon rush for loss of 10 yards?
Correct.
Okay. So that makes things make a little bit more sense, but it's also really disappointing. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. You're fine. I know that this ended up being a 5-point game, but the difference between, say, if they get that field goal, that Chris Tennant, it was a 50-plus yard field goal, so it's not a gimme. But we've seen Chris Tennant hit those field goals before. So I would say that, it's more than a 50% shot of him making that field goal. Suddenly, you don't need a Hail Mary. You just need a field goal to win it on that last drive. And if you don't miss the extra point, granted, the extra point may seem somewhat inconsequential, and it seems strange that Kleiman didn't go for 2 after missing an extra point. But, I mean, at that point, because it happened in the second quarter, I think it's a bit early to be chasing points. So I get it. But, yeah, Olguin had a really bad day and was actually ended up being replaced. But even then, I think that you could say he had the least offensive of all the performances. The next one in terms of bad is Connor Riley. And this is strange because in some ways, Connor Riley called a really, really good game, specifically in the passing game. But it's his stubbornness to try and do the same running concepts that didn't work. Guess what made a guest appearance, Connor?
Please tell me. Please tell me.
The Messingham Full House Veer. It made 5 guest appearances.
Now that is interesting.
Yeah, it made 5 guest appearances, and it worked exactly once.
Wow.
And it didn't work on the first time. It worked on like the second.
Okay. Wow, I really missed a lot. It's almost also nothing. So
yeah, the thing is with Connor Riley is he called a really solid game in the passing game, which is why he, for pretty much the entire day leading up to this episode, I was debating which of the two between Avery Johnson and Connor Riley was going to get the F. And there was a brief time where I was considering both of them. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and they showed on multiple replays, people were schemed wide open. Like not a soul within 5 yards of them past the first down marker. And this is where you sort of get into the third person where blame solely falls on, and that is Avery Johnson. This is unquestionably, to my mind at least, probably the worst game that Avery Johnson has had in his career to this point. People will point to BYU. I sort of scrubbed that game because, again, of the 1 in a million chances, and Avery started pressing really bad. This was the opposite problem. Avery just did not look like himself. There were multiple occasions where he would get out of the pocket and he would basically start jogging, and not a guy within, there's one instance in particular that I think is especially egregious, where there wasn't a soul within 5 yards of him and he was 2 yards away from the first down and he just walked out of bounds. Didn't even reach the ball or anything. Just walked out of bounds, which in hindsight is maddening. But even outside of that moment, his mechanics were awful. He was constantly letting his feet die in the pocket, which was the result, which is why both of the balls ended up getting intercepted and why a lot of his inaccurate passes were inaccurate, because he would stand there and just completely let his feet die, which you can't do as a quarterback. You just absolutely cannot do that. Even Wonkus is upset about this, but you can't do that as a quarterback. And that's why those 2 interceptions happened. And even then, he was missing he had a problem with missing open guys at the beginning of the year. None of the guys that he was missing early in the year were as open as they were getting in this game. There were legitimately times where there was not a soul within 2 counties of a receiver, and Avery just didn't see him. And they are part of the progression. They weren't just decoy routes. I saw him look there. He just didn't throw it. And all of this is to say that, he still had he had a really, really good throw to Jace where, again, his feet died, but he somehow, while getting hit, delivers an absolute dime to Jace Brown on a go ball. But that doesn't take away from the really bad interceptions and the yards that he left onto the field. So, Connor, before we reveal the number one individual that I think K-State that cost K-State this game, any thoughts on the previous 3 entries?
Just really interesting to mention a long snapper on this podcast. I was a long snapper in the 8th grade, and so I feel a sense of kinship with Mason Olguin. But yeah, that's you don't want to be mentioning the long snapper more often than not. So bad, thumbs down, not good.
But to me, the ultimate reason why K-State ends up falling in this game is Keenan Garber. And I don't want to dogpile on him, but he has had exactly one game this entire year where he has been playable, and the rest of them he has been the worst the worst starting corner that I have seen in a K-State uniform since the beginning of this show. It's not close either. There are even backup corners that are immediately coming to my mind that hurdle Keenan Garber. And
I'm going to pose a hypothetical to you really quick.
Okay.
One-on-one Martian death ray pointed at the earth, like literally everything comes down to this. Are you taking to cover a, let's just say, average Big 12 receiver one-on-one? Are you taking Keenan Garber or are you taking Omar Daniels?
Omar Daniels.
Wow. Let's see. I think that tells it all because Omar Daniels.
Omar got dusted a lot, and like don't get me wrong, I think Omar Daniels kind of gets dunked on a lot because the two highlights of his career are both him getting dusted by Oklahoma receivers, which that's a shame. That really could have happened to anybody.
Yeah.
But even then, you wouldn't notice Omar Daniels on the field 9 times out of 10. You notice Keenan Garber is on the field because he's doing one of 3 things. He gets really unlucky, which I don't blame him for getting unlucky, and he just, perfect pass. Sometimes that happens. You're playing defensive back. You just sort of have to take those on the chin and move on. He's holding in the most obvious way possible, or he's getting dusted. Those are the 3 Keenan Garber moments. The first one, like I said, I don't blame him on. It's the last 2 that bother me. Because the only times that Houston was able to get anything through the air was targeting Keenan Garber. And you may be noticing a theme here that whoever Keenan Garber is guarding, this has been a theme for at least the last 3 weeks, whoever Keenan Garber is on is the leading receiver for the team. And if they switch, that just means that Keenan Garber is probably holding the other guy. And like I said, I don't want to sort of dogpile on it because he's having a rough enough season as it is. But the defensive pass interference on that go-ahead drive sort of sealed his fate for the grade. The rest of the defensive backs, honestly, I would have probably given like a C+ or a B-, because the only other defensive back who was noticeable was Jordan Riley overrunning a few fits and Marquise Siegel missing a potential sack. That's it. That's all you notice for the defensive backs. But Keenan Garber getting dusted and then giving up what ended up being the game-losing pass interference call. If Justice James was playing, K-State wins this game. Anyway, so...
That's a sentence that has not been said many times throughout the history of this show, and that is Justice James saves the game for the Kansas State Wildcats.
And he was playing, by the way, and I think he gave up like 1 catch, but it was on one of those, he's playing off coverage free access routes. That's like, whatever, you can have that. But Zion Chris ended up going 11 for 11 with 1 touchdown and 103 yards. First off, okay. But none of the throws he was making were particularly impressive. It's just that Houston simply wanted this game more, and they got positive field position because of a bunch of K-State self-inflicted errors. And I think that is what makes this game hurt so bad, because it didn't take a miracle for Houston to beat us. It didn't take a bunch of 1 in a million chances. It didn't take a raucous environment. No, K-State just pissed down their own leg and vomited on themselves simultaneously, and that's why Houston won the game.
Man, uh, Zayshawn Rich time, I guess.
Donovan, Justice James,
Somebody.
the transfer corner from Rice.
Jordan Dunbar.
Jordan Dunbar. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone. Literally anyone. And I know that, Keenan Garber's been around the program for a while. And, this is going to be a general topic, but Kleiman's very loyal to the guys who stick by him. And damn it if Keenan Garber has not stuck by Chris Kleiman and the program and doing everything that he's been asked, but he can't keep being a starting corner. He just can't. It's getting bad. It's been bad, but it's getting worse, and it's not getting better because everyone now realizes, oh, wait a minute, we can target this guy because no one's targeting Parrish, because whenever you have that opportunity, why would you target Parrish when, you have a former wide receiver on the opposite side? Or you could target the slot with Jordan Riley or Jack Fabris. Or if Jack Fabris is playing middle field safety, every single K-State fan is praying to every god that has ever existed they're not going to do a deep shot.
We need to get to Jack Fabris and tell him that when he's playing center field, anytime a ball is in the air, like this is a baseball lesson, anytime the ball's in the air, your first step should be back. So I think that would be a helpful lesson for old Jack there. But on Keenan, what would you say is like the opposite of a defender locking down a side of the field? Because I'm leaning towards an offense engaging in manifest destiny on the side of the field.
Adverse possession on the side of the field.
And the only thing they're lacking is longevity. But if this keeps going throughout the season, then they might be there.
And we've been pretty negative, and they deserve it. But there are a few good performances in this game. Dylan Edwards got a few touches. He looked pretty solid with all of them. Jace Brown, 3 for 86. Keegan Johnson looked really, really good. 6 for 76 and a touchdown on Avery's probably second best throw of the day. It was like a little, I think you'll probably just call it like a pocket ball, where he literally just throws a fade route, but instead of going high, he just goes low and puts it right on Keegan Johnson's hip, and he catches it for the touchdown. That was an elite throw, which made the rest of the game so inexplicable, because Avery did have those two amazing NFL caliber throws, and then, I don't know, had a seizure on 2 really bad interceptions. Jaden Jackson got his catches early. He's been really reliable, been really happy with him. But again, credit to Houston. Houston won this game. And I know that, you have a bunch of self-inflicted errors. The easy line is, K-State didn't, Houston didn't win this game. K-State lost this game. Both of those things can be true, and Houston almost certainly won this game with a 14-point fourth quarter, because they just outworked K-State basically, and they were, they didn't say die. That's the fear with any Willie Fritz team, is they're not going to say die, and they are more than willing to embarrass you at any given moment. After this loss, I was not expecting K-State to be ranked at all. The fact that they were ranked 22nd blew my mind.
I was very surprised that K-State remained ranked in this iteration of the polls, because I don't really think we deserve to be ranked after this performance. But man, what's even crazier with Avery, I'm going through PFF right now. Both of his picks came when he was kept clean, where there were non-pressure interceptions. I don't know what to say about that. So is he just sitting there getting bored and then like making the throw he knows is bad and immediately regretting it? I do that on College Football 25 sometimes, but I'm an idiot and not a Division I quarterback. So
Is he Drew? Are you asking if he's Drew locking it? Where half of the time it's quote, half the time I let go of the football and think, oh no.
maybe that might be what's going on here, but man, like Avery hasn't had a performance this year that is like really like dismayed me to the level that this one has. I mean, this was just a categorical step back for a majority of not just the roster but the staff, and that's what makes this hurt even more than it already would. That and also, if we had won this game, if we just held on and Iowa State still loses, driver's seat right there. Like, we just need to win out and keep Iowa State off our back. Like, and the margin of error there, it goes down to 0 for Iowa State. So this was a great opportunity, but instead we have relinquished control. Colorado now controls their own destiny, and we beat them, but now we have 2 losses, and they're only conference losses to us.
Yep. So we need Colorado to lose, and let me test my sort of play-by-play ability to give you the best picture of the interceptions that I possibly can, to, I guess, let you kind of be the judge of how bad the interceptions are. The first one was an RPO to Keegan Johnson where Avery's feet die in the pocket and he just basically sails it over Keegan Johnson's head. And he doesn't sail it like 5 yards over his head. It's just enough to where Keegan can't really get his hands on it. And the guy behind the play then juggles the ball and a different guy ends up picking it off. So, he's late on the RPO read and ends up sailing the throw because he's off of timing. And the second interception was on a longer developing pass play where everyone basically just ran switch releases and sat down at the sticks. And Avery, there was a baton over the middle of the field, actually, was immediately sprinting towards, I don't remember who was sitting in the middle of the field, but he was just sitting in the middle of the field, and Batten admittedly makes a pretty good play to dive and catch the interception. The part of that bothers me about that play was this was the one time that the check down was legitimately wide open, and it was like second down. So like the check down was not only wide open for like 6 or 7 yards, because that was another problem that Avery had, was he was either locking in on a read and then immediately checking it down when there were other opportunities downfield and he was kept clean, which again, that one I'm more okay with because it's just him being young. But yeah, so how bad did I make those interceptions sound to you?
Honestly, they sounded sugar-coated. But it's still really bad. I mean, the Keegan one didn't sound as egregious the way that you worded it, I'll say. But the one that was picked off by Batten over the middle, that one did not sound very good. So
no. And that was sort of the moment that I knew K-State was going to lose this game. That and Jordan Riley coming downhill and missing a run fit that ended up being Houston's longest rushing play on the game. But so I've talked as much about this game as I can really stand to. Now we can do our sort of weekly, I guess, roundup for the Big 12. Iowa State ends up losing to Texas Tech. So if Colorado loses, you're not looking at a multi-step sort of equation here for K-State. This isn't how Bernie Sanders can still win in 2016 moment. Like this, all you need is Colorado to lose. The downside, I think Colorado's last games are like KU, Oklahoma State, and I'm missing someone.
They have 4 more games. They are at Texas Tech,
Okay.
Home against Utah, at KU, home against Oklahoma State.
Oh God, they're winning out.
They probably are winning out unless Tech gets them.
By the way, watching the end of that Texas Tech Iowa State game was very funny because I was just sitting with my girlfriend, and she's not as familiar with college football, and I said, now let's see the stoppable force meets the movable object here between Iowa Stating, and Texas Teching. It was Iowa Stating that won and lost the day, but Colorado needs to drop a game to get us back into that conversation. I've given up on BYU losing a game, even though I still don't think they're a good team. Also, this is not on me. I was very complimentary of them. I now believe that jinxes are not real. So
the issue could be that you did say after recording, but we were still on the call, but post-recording that Houston's not very good. So it may just be a over the internet communication thing that we'll have to consider. But we can test this though with you can text me this information for our next game, and we can see if it persists through just text, or if it's just a visual thing.
We'd have to do it for a different sport because the rest of the schools, this isn't me glazing, this isn't me sugarcoating. The rest of the three schools on the schedule are genuinely good. Arizona State, Cincinnati, and Iowa State are all genuinely good teams, which pisses me off. But
I guess the benefit is that we can't overlook them because we can't afford to, and B, they're actually good teams that we can't just act like we're too cool to prepare for. So
yeah, and 2 of the 3 of them are at home. So
yeah,
but so Colorado needs to lose at least one game, and then K-State needs to win out. Despite this game, I still think that K-State is more than capable of winning out. I think there are a few people that said that, this team isn't K-State, I should say. K-State isn't that good. They're worse than their record. They've been skating by. No, I don't think any of that is even remotely close to true. I think that K-State is a very good team that, for better or for worse, has a lot of chaos because the offense is so young. And also, shout out Lucas, who actually called this months ago and got sauced on.
Yeah. Oh, for what it's worth, we both did. But he was the one that said Houston was good, and that's why he got sauced on. That was because he said that Houston was good. And that was why people were getting upset with him on Twitter. I just picked this game as our random upset for no particular reason. I didn't have a very good reason for it. Lucas had clearly done his homework and was ready to.
Willie Fritz scared me. That was the only reason I had, and that was the only reason I gave on the preview.
Mm-hmm. But I really hope that next time we play Houston, that we just eviscerate them. I don't hate Willie Fritz, but I do want him to be sad. And I want him to feel the pain that he has wrought on me. This isn't
it's not personal.
Yeah, it's not personal. This is we're just exacting justice here.
Yeah. So, Connor, I'll ask you this question first. So do you think K-State, as it stands right now, is capable of winning out?
Sure. Yeah, I think that they're capable of winning out. I don't know if they will, but I think that there is enough talent on this team to do it. I mean, back in 2022, K-State was in a very tough spot to make it to Arlington. We were pretty much ready to call it quits after we lost to Texas.
Yep.
Then Texas lost to TCU and K-State won out, and K-State went in and got a championship against an undefeated team. That was a 9-3 K-State team that snuck its way in. Now, granted, it's going to be a lot harder because there's way more teams now in the Big 12. and some of them have easier schedules, you could say. But this is if nothing else, I think that we're going to see a lot of fight down the stretch here. Iowa State worries me because Klieman just had an issue with Campbell at Iowa State, and I don't know how I feel about that game, but I guess we'll see. I think this team is long-winded answer, but I think they're capable of winning out despite what is the most embarrassing loss in the Klieman era.
Yeah, I think they're capable of it, but I wouldn't project it right now. If I were to project, K-State probably finishes 9-3, and because this is K-State and hearts demand break, they probably end up losing to Iowa State in that last week. And the fact that it's an away game is ultimately what swung it for me, because Iowa State will, be a raucous environment. They're probably going to end up fighting for their Big 12 championship lives as well. So if Colorado loses, that game becomes a de facto elimination game, provided both teams win out to that point. But we talked about it in the preview for the season that this team would be especially susceptible to sort of, what the hell are you doing losses, because they're so young on offense. And despite that, they've been so good for the vast majority of this year. I'm still happy with how Connor Riley has been calling plays generally this entire year. The main problem has been his stubbornness with the running game and just not putting in the proper counter punches for it. And maybe there's an offensive lineman who has a tell with the running game. I don't know. I don't have all 22, and I can't see it on the broadcast angle. But
that would explain a lot from the last couple of weeks and just how bad the run game's been, particularly for a team that was not just good but dominant running the football throughout a good portion of the first half of the year. And now we are borderline incapable of running the football, which is a huge whiplash.
Yeah. We did not expect to become an air raid team.
No, not at all.
But do you have any final notes before we cast this episode off into the aether and mentally prepare ourselves for the Q&A episode?
It's almost basketball season. In fact, day this releases, it is basketball season.
Real. It's going to be fun. It's going to be real fun.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggieVilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I'm at ACEdward00.
I am at Connor Baltzor, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store and the supporters link, both found in our podcast and Twitter bios. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. For come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.